Welcome to the AT Parenting Survival Podcast, where you get help and guidance through the chaos of parenting a child with anxiety or OCD. This show is for educational purposes and is not intended to replace the guidance of a qualified professional. Here's your host, child therapist, Natasha Daniels.
Well, hello there, and welcome to another episode of the AT Parenting Survival Podcast. Today, we're going to be talking about one of the main things that we can do to help our kids with OCD, and one of the biggest struggles. And that's, how do you effectively pull back those OCD accommodations that most of us are doing in order to ensure your child's long-term success? We're going to dive into what OCD accommodations are, why they're not helpful, why most of us do them, and the do's and don'ts of how to systematically pull back those accommodations. But before we get started, I just want to give you a couple announcements. One, this podcast is sponsored by OCD. And OCD offers affordable, effective, convenient therapy, and they're available in the US and outside the US. You can schedule your free 15-minute consultation to see if OCD is the right fit for you and your child. Just go to treatmyocd.com. That's treatmyocd.com. I'll also leave a link in the show notes. Starting this week is my free series, Survival Tools for Parents Raising Kids with Anxiety or OCD. This is one of my most popular series. It's totally free. It starts on Thursday, which is November 6, 2025, depending on when you're listening to this. And you can register at atparentingsurvivalseries.com. I'll be going into the details of how to motivate your kids, how to create a therapeutic home environment. Even if your child is not able or willing to work on their OCD, there are things that we can do, including the topic for today, to help move the dial and create that therapeutic home environment where they can succeed long term. And I'll go into how to do that, the ingredients that are really important to include when you're doing that. And that's all free in my series at atparentingsurvivalseries.com. All right, let's jump into today's episode, the do's and don'ts of pulling OCD accommodations back. So briefly, we're not going to dive into this in depth because it's very simplistic, but what are OCD accommodations? Basically, we are the metaphorical sink. That is the easiest way I have found to explain it to parents, is that OCD in general starts with an intrusive thought, feeling, image that gets stuck in our child's brain. And the second component to OCD is that they need to do or avoid something to get brief relief. That second part is the compulsion, whether it's mental, whether it's physical, or whether it involves somebody else. That's you. And we become part of that OCD loop. And so there's an intrusive thought or feeling. That's point A. There's the need to do something or avoid something to get brief relief. That's point B. And then it grows, and then point A gets bigger. And so it's a vicious cycle. And we become part of that hamster wheel cycle. We become part of that loop, and we are inadvertently, or sometimes inadvertently, because we know we're doing it but we can't stop, growing the OCD with our kids. And so when we participate in a compulsion, we are growing those neural pathways that grow OCD bigger. When our kids are doing compulsions, whether it involves us or not, they're growing the neural pathways that grow OCD bigger. And OCD compulsions can look like lots of different things. It can be providing compulsive reassurance. It can be responding in a very specific way that OCD wants you to respond. It could be giving that reassurance that their hands are clean enough, or that food is safe to eat, or that touching Clorox wipes and then touching their mouth is a safe thing to do, or that they're not a bad person if they thought that they hated their friend, or they said a bad word in their head. I'm just giving you random examples, but I'm pointing out that it can literally be anything around their theme. We may also follow OCD's rules in our house. OCD doesn't just hijack our child's mind, it hijacks our entire household. So maybe you don't sit in certain spots or touch certain things, or you wash your hands at certain times, or you follow OCD's rules. Because if you don't, OCD is going to have a huge meltdown, and it's going to disrupt and dysregulate our child. And so we feel like we need to do it Possibly 1, to keep the peace in our house. 2, to keep the sanity in our house and in ourselves. 3, we're worried about the damage it will do to our child if we don't do it. Or 4, we think we're actually helping. And maybe all of those. And so most parents, when they join the AT parenting community, my member community, are doing accommodations. Most parents, when I saw them in my therapy practice, were doing accommodations. When you start this journey, I have almost never met a parent who wasn't doing some sort of OCD accommodations when I started working with them, because we all do it. It's not black and white. And sometimes therapists or professionals who are not in the trenches like I am or like you are don't realize that it isn't black and white. It's easier said than done to just say, stop feeding the OCD. Stop accommodating your child's OCD compulsions. It's hard. You're going to get big reactions. You're going to second guess and third guess yourself. You're going to wonder if this is actually the right thing to do. You're not going to get any accolades from your child saying you're a fantastic parent. It's really rough. And so my hope today is to go through the do's and the don'ts of how to successfully pull back these OCD accommodations. They're not good long-term because they grow OCD. Even if you look like, even if it looks like your child is calmer and it reduces their anxiety in the short term or their discomfort in the short term, and it feels like you're helping because it solved a problem in the moment, trust me, research has shown you're not helping. Just like them washing their hands over and over is not helping their OCD. It's growing it long term. And so we want to pull our involvement back. Now, sometimes parents will say, but I don't want them to suffer. Actually, I don't remember where I read this. It was either a comment on social media or somebody messaged me in my member community. I can't remember. I get so many messages, but they were saying, I'm afraid to pull back the accommodations because, it might have been on social media, because then my child's going to be struggling in their own head, and I don't want them to have to struggle alone. Well, it's kind of like, and I hate to make this analogy, but it is so accurate. It's kind of like if your child or your teenager or your young adult was a drug addict, and you're like, but they're really upset and they really want these drugs, and so I just want to provide it for them. And then, I don't want them to struggle alone. Like they're craving drugs. I don't want them to struggle, so I'm just going to give it to them. It is at that level that when we are giving those accommodations, we are really feeding the beast. Now, it doesn't mean that we're going to pull back completely 100% overnight, because it didn't happen overnight, and we need to build up. And that's the whole thing we're going to focus on today. But the first step is getting the parent out of the mix, getting you out of the mix. It's the easier step, believe it or not, because you have control. You can't tell your child not to do a compulsion, especially ones that you're not involved in. You can't grab their hands and tell them they can't wash anymore. That's not going to be helpful long term. You can't, hold them back when they're going into the door frame 5 times, or when they won't touch the red cup and you force them to touch the red cup. That's not going to work long term. They have to do it on their own, and you have to build up their skills, their motivation, and their empowerment, which is all the things that we're going to be talking about in my free series that starts on Thursday. So if you haven't registered, atparentingsurvivalseries.com. But we can remove ourselves from the mix. And yes, will they do other compulsions that don't relate to us? Probably. It'll be mental or physical. It will move away from you. And will they continue to do things? Yes. Will they be distressed? Yes. But you are the first layer of the onion. And that layer we can peel because it's our layer. And until you get out of the way, OCD will never improve. Think about that. Until you get out of the way, OCD will never improve. You are a layer in the onion, and until that first top layer is peeled, we can't get to the next layer. And so, yes, it's really, really critical that we slowly and systematically pull back our involvement in feeding the OCD. Notice I said slowly and methodically with intention. That part's really important, because when you do this willy-nilly, it backfires pretty quickly. And then you might throw up your hands and say, I can't do this. I tried and it didn't work. It didn't work because you didn't do it in the way that will work long term. So let's break that down. I have 8 do's and don'ts. I'm going to do the do's and don'ts together because normally they're just like the opposite. They're like the opposite, the flip side of the coin. And I do have a handout for you as well. You are welcome. I've been creating handouts because they're so easy to do these days to outline what I'm talking about. And so if you want to get the PDF that will kind of the visual do and don't of each of the 8 points I'm going to be bringing up, you can get that at natashadaniels.com/handouts. And what we're doing is we have a page that will have all of our handouts, all of our episodes, since I'm offering handouts quite a lot. And so when you register for my handouts, you'll get access to that page, and then you can just go to that page every time I say handouts and you'll see it. And so this is episode 443. And so you'll just look for episode 443 when you go to my handout page. So you can just go there at natashadaniels.com/handouts because you don't have to take notes if you do not want to. If you are a note taker, I already took them for you. Okay, let's cover the first 4. We'll take a break and we'll get to the next 4. So the first do, and I do them in order of how I think you should systematically do this. Now, a caveat to this is there's a lot of good resources that will really walk you through in depth. So the SPACE program is L.A. Leibowitz's SPACE approach, and he is out of Yale. There's been a lot of research done about systematically pulling back accommodations. He's not the only person who talks about this, but he's certainly the main person, along with Alec Pollard, who talks about family accommodations. And so I would recommend, they both have books. I give you both, and I'll leave a link down below in the show notes as well. L.A. Leibowitz wrote Breaking Free of Child Anxiety and OCD, a scientifically proven program for parents. He also has spacetreatment.net, where you can find providers that will actually walk you through this as well. I actually have created a study guide course in my online school at atparentingsurvivalschool.com. So if you like my style of teaching, it was actually a request from parents in my AT parenting community. They wanted me to do videos on the SPACE approach and worksheets because they like the way that I teach. And so I created that. And then I thought, well, I'm going to open this up to the public as well. Maybe they would want this course. And it's actually one of my most popular courses. So you can check that out at atparentingsurvivalschool.com. And I'll leave a link below to the SPACE course in case you want to systematically have me walk you through this. Another book I just want to bring up before we dive into this, and I actually like this one the most, is Alec Pollard's book, When a Loved One Won't Seek Mental Health Treatment, How to Promote Recovery and Reclaim Your Family's Well-Being. This is my favorite book, because it is not just for kids. So if you have teens or young adults or older adults that you are a parent trying to support, I love this book and I love his approach. He's been doing this for a very long time. He's out of Missouri, and he does have a program as well. And I will leave a link to his program so that you have that too. Okay, so let's dive into the do's and don'ts. I just wanted to give you some deeper resources that will walk you systematically through this. But a lot of people read about SPACE or they read Alec Pollard's book and then they really don't know how to execute, or they execute it wrong. Let's talk about what that looks like. So the first do is take the time to collect data and know what accommodations you do. Even if you think you know them, even if you're like, Natasha, I live, eat and breathe this, I know, you may not know all of them. You might be surprised when you really start to pay attention how many things you're actually accommodating related to OCD. So take 72 hours and write everything down. Accommodations are things that you are doing directly, not what things you are preventing. So for instance, if I am completing a loop, my child says, is this safe to eat? And I say, it is safe. That's me. If my child says, will I throw up? And I say, no, you won't throw up. You're good. That's me. If my child's washing their hands and I don't turn off the water or grab their hands, that's not an accommodation. We're not talking about compulsions that do not involve you that you're not preventing. We're talking about things that you implicitly participate in or provide the material for. Soap, toilet paper, right? Those things, that is an accommodation. Those are a hard one. Those are trickier. And the things that you do, right? Wash your hands when they tell you to, change your outfit when they tell you to, not go in here. Dad doesn't go into the kitchen when they're in there because he's contaminated. Those things that directly involve you. So take some time to collect data and don't rush into it and start pulling back accommodations. A lot of times parents think, I got this. Okay, OCD accommodations equal bad, not doing them equal good. I'm going to just do this. I got it. I don't need to learn a process. I don't need to learn a method. I don't need to read a book. I don't need to take this study course. I don't need to listen to this podcast. I get it. It's not complicated. Well, it kind of is, because there's a lot of preparations before you start pulling back accommodations. So don't rush into it and just start pulling it back because you heard that it was bad. Okay, on to the second one. Do involve your child when you're creating your accommodation list. Let them know what you're doing. This isn't a secret. And see if they have anything to add. They may not. If your child's really resistant to talking about this, they might just be like, what are you talking about? I'm not going to participate in this. That's fine, but give them an opportunity. They might say, when you actually say this, that's my OCD talking. They might add things that you're not even aware of. So do try to involve your child while you're creating the list. Tell them what you're doing. I have YouTube videos on how accommodations grow their OCD. I have one on how reassurance grows OCD, and I have one on how confessing grows OCD, and I will link those below as well. Okay, just made a note to link those. I'll also link my space study course if you're interested in that. And so the first step is getting our kids to understand, and they're not gonna like this, but getting them to understand that you participating in OCD's rules is not helping them. That you love them and you're learning that doing what OCD wants is making their life worse long-term because it's growing their OCD. So that's the second one. Don't do this alone unless your child won't engage. And so ideally, this is a collaborative approach. If they are not going to want to engage and they get angry when you talk about it, then drop it. But ideally, we want it to be a collaborative approach. Okay, on to the third one. Do sit down and discuss with your child what accommodation you'll be pulling back first. So this can, once you have your list, this can be a specific accommodation or it could be a type of accommodation. So it might be a type of accommodation, which might mean, sometimes your OCD will tell me to wash my hands all the time. I'm not going to wash my hands when OCD wants. That will be a type of accommodation. It might be a specific accommodation. You don't want your dad to come into the kitchen because you think he's contaminated. From now on, your dad's going to come in when he wants to. That's very specific. And so decide, which one are we going to start with? Because sometimes it's a type of accommodation and you're not going to be very specific. Like when you ask me, if your food is good to eat, I'm not going to answer those. But when you ask me if you look sick, I'm going to answer those. It might be easier to just say, when you want to ask me questions about being sick, I'm not going to answer those. So that's a judgment call. There's a lot of judgment calls through this process. And so a lot of it is just knowing your child and knowing what they can handle. And there are, like I said, programs that will walk you through this. There are those 2 books that I will link. There's my study guide course, and there are space therapists that will walk you through too. So lots of support. If this is the first time you're hearing about pulling back accommodations and you're starting to feel overwhelmed, don't. There's a lot of support. Whether you want to read a book or an audiobook or a study course or even get a therapist, there's support out there for you to help you do this not alone. A lot of you might be listening, especially those of you in my AT parenting community who are much more seasoned and knowledgeable in this stuff, and you've done all the books or you've taken the courses or you know about all this, and this is just a helpful tweak to your process. And so that's my hope for some of you. Okay. So we are going to sit down and discuss with our child what accommodations we're pulling back first. What we're not going to do, the don't in this, is we're not going to do this alone unless your child won't engage. And I'm still going to let them know what one. They may not want to pick which one we're going to do first, but I am going to communicate that with them. Now to piggyback on the third one, let's move to the fourth one. The fourth one is related to the third one. So do pick the first one to pull back based on what your child can handle. So you're going to look at what accommodation are you going to stop doing based on what your child can handle. What you're not going to do is pick one that makes life easier for you. Now, this is very tempting. And I know as a mom to kids with these struggles, it would be very tempting for me to pick the one that's really driving me nuts, the one that is keeping me awake, or the one that's making me late for work, or the one that is taking the most time. But we really want to prioritize what can our child handle. So if there's a smaller one, aim small. You want to do the least upsetting one. Now, sometimes they're all upsetting, but most of the time there's a range. And if your child is participating and you're collaborating, I sometimes have kids rank them. And so they'll rank, this is a 10. It would be a 10 if you did this. That's super hard. It's the hardest. This one's a 2. This one's a 4. Some kids are difficult and they'll say they're all a 10. And maybe it feels like a 10 to them. And so there is no range. But typically there is a range. And so I always want parents to start very easy. And even if you're like, well, that one's not even going to bother him too much. Good. Start with that one. Because we just want to it's like when you're riding a bike. You just want to get the wheels turning. It doesn't matter if it's really going to impact them or you. It's getting them used to the idea that you're not going to always do what OCD wants. And so you want to pick the absolute easiest accommodation to pull back that will have the least upset in your child, not in your life. I know that's upsetting because I rather pick the one that's going to make a huge difference in my life, but that's going to backfire. So pick the one that makes their life easier. Ideally, on the number 3 point was we want to collaborate with them and we want them to pick it. And I always say to kids, here's the list of the things that I'm doing that's growing your OCD. And I'm going to pick one of these things to pull back because over time, I want to stop feeding your OCD because I love you. Ideally, I'd rather you pick the thing. So here's a list. So you either pick it or I'm going to pick it. No matter what, one thing from this list is going to be scratched off and it's not going to be done anymore. I'd rather you pick that. But if you can't or you won't, then I'll pick it. That can sometimes encourage kids to pick it because they rather pick the poison than you. And so that's the language that I typically use. All right, we're going to take a quick break. And then when we get back, I'm going to tell you the final 4 do's and don'ts when you're pulling back OCD accommodations with your kids. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
It's time we put help directly in our kids' hands. Introducing Crushing OCD course for kids and teens.
It was way more helpful than all the other therapy we've ever done because we didn't really know what to do. So we weren't really doing it before. So the course helped to figure out what the exposures are and how to do them.
We're not in therapy and find it really hard to find an ERP trained therapist here. So we're currently with the public health service, but again, they don't seem to be trained in ERP. It's filled that gap that we don't have that was desperately needed.
This was really well timed for us to use between therapists and to help us get off to a good start with this new practice.
It was easy to use. I was able to do it from my phone or also on the computer.
There's different ages, so there were younger kids, there were teenagers, and so that was really nice too, to have a variety of ages where it wasn't just geared towards younger kids or older kids. It was a nice variety.
It's helpful for our kids to hear it from this third party as opposed to just us saying it.
I really like the offense and defense method. I love working on poking at OCD while it's sleeping. It makes it a little bit easier to do, and it's kind of fun. I'm planning on using it to work on my fear of holding or touching batteries and stuff like that.
So it was really helpful, and I think a lot of other kids would like it. I thought that I was the only one who had worrying about the weather and stuff. And then there was somebody else on there who worried about the same thing, which was really helpful.
Seems less scary to work on stuff now that I've watched this class, and I'm more interested to work on it.
I'm trying to do more exposures still, and before I wasn't, I just didn't want to do them.
I've worked on some of my bigger compulsions and been successful.
I realized that it was helpful to do the exposures. Before it was really, really hard. It's still hard, but it's helpful to know that I need to do them.
Before there would be a lot of battles about it, so it is definitely less loggerheads.
Really, really good course and super helpful.
Definitely would recommend this. It's really easy to follow. It's nice bite-sized videos. I really like the worksheets that go along with it, and I think it's really helpful.
To learn more about this course and register your child or teen, go to atparentingsurvivalschool.com.
All right, welcome back. So let's go over the final 4. So we left off with you picking the one that ideally your child can handle more than what will make your life easier. The next do is discuss exactly what you'll do instead with your child. Even if they're not engaged in this process and they don't care, or they do care, but they're not happy that you're doing this, you want to convey what you're going to be doing. And in both Alec Pollard's approach, his approach is called Family Wellbeing Approach, FWBA. I love his family well-being approach. I feel like it's more comprehensive than the space approach, but the space approach is talked about more when we're talking about kids. And Alec Pollard's approach is talked about more in general terms. His approach has been around longer, from my understanding, and I feel like it's more comprehensive and more realistic. And it talks more about the well-being and welfare of the full family, not just the child or adult who's struggling with OCD. And so you can Google his approach, Family Wellbeing Approach. And then Ellie Leibowitz's approach is the space approach. Now, in both approaches, they have a component, and both break it down into very specific steps. Step 1, do this. Step 2, like very specific. But in both approaches, there's an announcement to the person with OCD, letting them know ahead of time, this is what's going to happen. The next time you ask me X, Y, and Z, this is how I'm going to respond instead. It prepares them. If they're not willing to hear it, then you text it to them or you write a letter, but you convey it in some way so they understand. What you don't want to do is just do it without giving them a heads up before you start, because then you're going to get a deer caught in headlights. You're going to get that dysregulated reaction. They're going to get really overwhelmed. They're not going to know how to handle it. They didn't expect it. And that's when we get kids who are threatening to hurt themselves or other people. They're having meltdowns. They get aggressive. They get desperate. They're cornered. It doesn't mean you're not going to have that reaction. But when you do it in a very calm, intentional, calculated way, they know, because you already said it. When your OCD asks me to do X, Y, and Z, this is exactly what I'm going to do or say from now on. So that's an important one. Okay, on to what number am I on? 6. Be proactive. This is kind of piggybacking on what I just talked about. Do be proactive and have a plan on how you'll handle difficult, aggressive, or self-harming behavior before you implement this. Don't be reactive when the situation arises. Have a plan ahead of time, because OCD is not going to high five you and say, you're phenomenal. You're doing great, mom or dad. Thanks for really not feeding my OCD. You're not going to get that. You're not going to feel good about this, because your child is going to tell you that you're being a really crummy parent and that you're not helping their OCD. You're making it worse, and that you're hurting them. And they might even threaten you, because OCD gets very overwhelmed by this. And so you might get kids who will say, I'm not going to eat. You might get kids who will say, I'm going to hurt myself. You might get kids who throw things, kick things, hit you. And so having a crisis plan is really important, because you don't want to have to decide in that moment, oh, shoot, now what do I do? Because you want to think of all options, plan B, plan C. What if they threaten this? You may even want to talk about it when you're discussing, hey, from now on, when your OCD wants me to do this, I'm going to do this. And if you do this, then we're going to have this happen, which might mean you look up mobile crisis units in your city and see if they exist. They do in my city. And so maybe I want to call the mobile crisis unit and say, what ages do you respond to? How quickly do you respond? If I was in this situation, would you respond? Right? check out what is available in your city, state, or country, which I know there may not be anything, but check it out. What hospitals would you take them to? I know that seems extreme, but it's important to know. What hospitals do you trust and do you not trust? Is there law enforcement that you trust or don't trust? Are there relatives or people, family or friends that you can let in around this? Somebody who maybe can calm your child down, or if they were at your house, your child wouldn't act out because it'd be embarrassing. Now, the SPACE program talks about this. They talk about support partners, I think they call them, and they're people in your community, your family, or your friends that would be part of the SPACE plan. I feel like I don't have anyone that I would necessarily call. I have one friend now, actually, that I think could be, she would definitely be a support partner. But prior to knowing her, I didn't have anybody. And so I know some of you out there don't have that. And that's where I feel like the SPACE program falls flat, is it really depends on these like support partners. And some of us are really doing this all alone and may not have that. So have a plan as much as you can. The goal would be not to throw our kids into such a fit that they're going to have those behaviors, but sometimes they will. And so we want to have a plan. With my son, in the past, when I would be pulling back behaviors that were growing, his mental health issues, I would say to him, if you threaten to hurt yourself, I will have to take you to the hospital, because it's not okay for me to not do anything when you say that you're going to hurt yourself. And then I have to follow through with that if that were to happen, because we're not just trying to threaten, we're trying to really provide a solid safety plan. Okay, the 7th one is be consistent when you're going to say, I'm not going to do this and I'm going to do this instead, and have other families be consistent as well, if possible. I know sometimes it is so hard to get everybody on board. So you may not be able to, I understand that, but you being consistent is really important. You don't want to renege on the plan unless you're really concerned for their well-being. And sometimes that does happen. I know sometimes with SPACE in particular, they're very black and white. They're like, hold it down, button it up, dig your heels, do not give in. And on the whole, I look at OCD like a 2-year-old who wants candy at the checkout at the grocery store. And there is a meltdown. And when I cave and I give into that meltdown, I just basically reinforced a 20-minute meltdown, because now the toddler OCD says, oh, as long as I put up a big fight or I scare them enough, they cave and they give in. And so now I've just grown that behavior even bigger. And I get that. As a behavioral therapist, I get that when our kids do negative behaviors, whether they have meltdowns, get aggressive, threaten, self-harm, or harm to others, or say hurtful things, and then we cave, we have just doubled down and reinforced all that behavior. So next time it'll be twice as bad. However, there are times where there's this oh shoot moment. Have you ever had that? I have. Where I'm like, oh shoot, I shouldn't have done this. This was too big. I shouldn't have pulled this back. Sometimes it happens with me because it wasn't planned, right? So that's one of my don'ts, where we're just doing something and I think I'm not going to accommodate that, or that's a new behavior and I'm not going to accommodate that. And then all of a sudden, I could tell I've pushed them too far. They're self-harming, or they're doing something that's scaring me. I don't have a crisis plan, and I have to pivot in that moment. As a parent and not a therapist, I get that we're going to have to pivot. I know that therapists will be like, don't pivot. Like, you got to stand firm. But there does come a time where you know your child and you're like, this is a bridge too far. That happened to us when we were traveling and we were in Alaska. I talked about this maybe quite a few episodes ago. And I was like, we're not going to accommodate this. I'm not even going to get into the whole story because you've heard it before if you listen to me. But he was doing self-harm and he was scratching and he was like bleeding. And it was like, okay, I had to give in to this because we're in the middle of Alaska, in the middle of the forest. and this is not going well. And so I just want to give you that wiggle room to say we make mistakes. Sometimes we pick something too hard, or sometimes it's a brand new behavior, or sometimes we're in public and we put our foot down because we're like, I'm not going to accommodate this, and it goes south. And you're going to be human. And sometimes we're going to have to say, bad idea. Now, in a perfect world, you don't fully give in, right? You find that you meet them halfway and you say, okay, fine, I can do this part for you. Then giving them the whole thing. But sometimes that's not possible. In the particular case with Alaska, he wanted the windows up because he felt like the bugs were coming in. It's a long story. Eventually, we just had to roll the windows up. There was no halfway because there wasn't a halfway to have. It was just do it or don't do it. And eventually we had to do it. So I just want to give you that. I just want to give you that permission and say, this is messy. It doesn't work clinically clean like therapists might have you think, because I'm in the trenches and I know that there are times where I've done stuff and then I'm like, oh my goodness, my oh shoot moments. And then I learn from them. I learn like, okay, note to self, he can't handle that, or that's not how I'm going to approach that next time. And so it comes with its own learning, which is a good thing. So nothing is for naught, right? I mean, every experience, even ones that turn out bad, give you data and help you learn for the next time, and make you do better and be better next time. We can't knock this out of the park 100% of the time. Okay, final one, number 8, is do make this fun if possible. Gamify it, offer incentives for handling the discomfort and sitting with their fears or their uncomfortable feelings. Don't expect them to be happy with the changes. This is the number one thing I see, is that parents are like, I don't think this is working because he's really upset by this. Yeah, he's going to be upset. She's going to be upset. She's going to tell you this isn't a good idea. He's going to tell you that he hates you. It's not going to go well. There will be meltdowns. There'll be cruel, vicious things said. The behavior will get worse before it gets better, but you're extinguishing the behavior. And that's what eventually happens, is it fizzles out over time. Just like that 2-year-old who is having that temper tantrum at the candy store. Now, if you had a hard time with your toddler because you always gave in, this is going to be hard for you. This is going to be extra hard because it takes that kind of consistency and tolerance of your child being really upset and angry with you and sometimes loud and upset. And it's going to be like that on steroids, because we're talking about not a toddler most of the time. And we're talking about bigger behaviors, and we're talking about more serious issues. But if it was hard for you to not give in to your child when they were toddlers, this is going to be doubly hard, because it's similar in the sense that you're trying to extinguish behavior and you have to wait it out. And waiting it out is hard for some people, harder for some people than others. Gamify it by offering incentives. You can say, hey, you can earn, X, Y, and Z, or earn bravery points when I don't give in to OCD and you are handling it well. And then identify what well means. You don't hit or scratch or threaten, whatever it may mean. Or maybe you offer incentives for them to not even ask you to do something for OCD, and they earn points for that. I do have a podcast that goes in depth on how to create effective incentive programs and plans at home, and I will link that as well. We do talk about that in this upcoming survival series. The last video goes all into how to motivate our kids and how to create an effective incentive program and the do's and don'ts of incentive programs. A lot of times parents offer incentives and it falls flat because they're doing it wrong. There's a right way and a wrong way to do a lot of this stuff. Not that it has to be black and white, but there are things that will make it harder and not work. And there are things that will make it easier and make it more effective. And I go into that in this series. Again, register at atparentingsurvivalseries.com because it does start on Thursday. You can register throughout the series. It's going from November 6th to November 14th. Actually, all the way, the replay will be all the way until November 16th. So if you're listening to this at any time during that period, register even if it's over. It ends on the 14th, but then that weekend, the 15th and 16th, there'll be a replay. So even if you register on the weekend, you'll get a link to the replay. So join us and participate, because there are also bonus live classes on the series website. And even if you've taken this series before, it's different. Those bonus live classes are different every single time. We talk about different things, I answer different questions, I share different stories, because my life continues, and I have new stories to share and new insights, and different people ask different questions. So it's a really good opportunity to jump in and sharpen your skills once again. I hope that you're finding the podcast helpful. If you are, don't forget to hit a star and rate it, or write a review. I greatly appreciate that. If I find one, I will read it to show my gratitude. And I don't know if I read this. I don't think so. Sometimes I go through Spotify, and a listener, actually, it was a member of the AT Parenting community, brought to my attention that people are leaving comments on Spotify, which I had no idea. Didn't even look at Spotify. So if you leave a comment on a very old episode, I won't catch it, but I do try to go back to the last, 5 or 6 episodes to see if anyone's written anything so that I can read those as well. And I do want to thank Hughes971, who wrote, "Thanks, Natasha. I've been listening for 2 years, and your podcast has been life-saving for me to understand my child's OCD." And that was under the episode 5 Things I've Learned Raising a Child with OCD, Anxiety, and ORFID. And I appreciate you taking the time to write that comment. If you write a comment, I will show my gratitude by reading them. So maybe I'll be reading yours next time. Don't forget to find the sparkle in everything you do. And don't forget to register for the series, and I'll see you over there. Take care.
Thank you for listening to the AT Parenting Survival Podcast. To get additional support raising a child with anxiety or OCD, visit Natasha's online school of on-demand classes at atparentingsurvivalschool.com.